Welcome to the Meria Heller Show, the internet's original podcast. Since the year 2000, always ahead of the curve, always on your side. A true warrior for truth and justice, Meria and her guests leave nothing out, and no one is off limits. There is only one truth, the rest is lies. Sit back, enjoy the education with a true daughter of Mother Earth. Sharp New York wit, spiritual knowing, and a very dry sense of humor, Meria will dissect the news and lies to make it all palatable. Education is power. Meria delivers rapid-fire truth like no one else can. Here she is, the mouth that roars, the legendary Meria Heller.
Good morning, world. Meria here, alive and kicking. Welcome to The Bigger Picture with my wonderful friend and co-host, Michael Reccia. Today we're going to be talking about Many Voices, One Mission, which is his latest book, but he's got another book ready to go to the presses. So good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Maria. It's great to be with you again.
It's always good to be with you. It feels like it's been 100 years since we last talked.
Yes, it does, and it's only 2 months.
I know. It's a crazy world we're living in, for sure. Anyway, you just told me before the show that you just completed the writing of your latest book.
Well, we completed the bringing through of the latest book. We completed the 18th transession last Saturday. So that means that the whole book is with us and on many devices, so it can't get lost. And Jane is furiously transcribing as I speak. She has 12 of the 18 chapters already committed to paper, or the equivalent of the digital equivalent of paper. And our schedule is that we get it to the printers just before Christmas, and it is released just after Christmas in January.
That's great. What do you have a title?
The Spaces Between.
The Spaces Between.
Yes, very enigmatic title. Yeah.
Well, I really like it.
Looking in the new book at the areas of life that we think have nothing in them. The spaces between our lives, what we consider to be empty space in the universe, what we consider to be empty space on Earth, and what is actually in those spaces, spiritually speaking.
Right. Many.
We're looking at aspects of ourselves. He furthers our knowledge of aspects of ourselves, but also looks at the other spiritual lives, aspects of spiritual life that coexist with us. Some of them positive, some of them negative. So it's a fascinating subject, a fascinating read, and does actually fill in the gaps in our spiritual knowledge. I think if someone's reading this book, they will never look at the earth in the same way again, and that was Joseph's intention, again, to shake us out of our complacency and to say things are not as they seem.
Right.
It's a different world than you expect it to be. And here's what's happening around you and through you, and here's what you're contributing to that world. And by the end of the book, you should have a very different view of things here.
Well, that's great. I can't wait. Many years ago, there used to be a New Age magazine called Connecting Link, and I used to write for them. Excuse me. I used to write for them quite often. But one column I remember that they had in that, and it wasn't mine, was the spaces between things. That was what
Really?
The column was called. And they would talk about, that there is no empty space here.
Yeah.
And it was pretty fascinating. So it's interesting. The title of your book makes me want to read it even more.
Oh, that's great. As with all Joseph's titles, they're not repeats. We don't do sequels.
Right. Well,
we do something that furthers knowledge.
That's what it should
do. Certainly, again, furthers knowledge in a startling and also an educational way, and a heartwarming way as well.
Right.
But there are some startling reveals in the chapters, and I can't wait for us to get it out there and to have reaction to it.
Well, I will tell you this. As you know, I do private sessions with a lot of people. And the way that I talk to them, when I can see that they're just starting to come into their spirituality or spiritual curiosity, I tell them don't bother reading, and then I tell them what books not to bother reading. And I say, if you want pure spiritual truth instead of being strung around and never getting a straight answer, you need to go over to josephspeaks.com and buy all the books. And that's what I recommend for my students. That's what I recommend to anybody. because your books have more truth in them. Straight talk, not, ring around the rosy and you never get an answer. And everybody that I've recommended to your work loves it.
Oh, thank you. It's again that the book is a call to action, as you've just said. That the books don't contain platitudes. Platitudes are useless. Or a book that, in my view, that at the end of the book you say, well, that was very nice, and then you move on and completely forget about what's been in the book, is useless to us at this point in our spiritual journey.
Right.
Each Joseph book is a call to action. It's a call to spiritual reality, but it says we need to do something, and we need to do something fast.
Right.
And it's down to each of us to do something.
Exactly. People think they're just going to sit home and chant the Om, saying there's no place like Om, or put a bubble of light around themselves. Yeah, that's not going to work. Or this misconception of if you visualize it, it'll happen, without any action behind it.
Yes.
And what I have found through many years of, being involved in, spirituality and teachings is a lot of times you can get one author who puts out a magnificent first book. It's loaded with great information. And then they realize there's money to be made. And the second, third, fourth book is a repeat of the same thing with no useful information.
Yes.
I cannot say that about your books.
Well, as you know, we don't take anything personally from sales of the book. Everything goes back into promoting the books and publishing the books. And it's always over to Joseph. I sit there, we sit once every month, or have done until last Saturday, and I don't know what it's going to be about. Sometimes I get a theme from Joseph, and I say, look, not now.
Right.
Don't bring it through now. Bring it through when we're sat together and we've got the power to deal with it. But the books assemble themselves as if magically, because, of course, he has a mission. He knows
Right.
what each book is going to be about. And at the beginning you think, well, what's this about? How does this tie together? These chapters don't seem to run together, but by the end of the book they do.
Right.
And he's made a very striking point in one area of spirituality.
Right.
But that's the other reason that we publish ourselves, that we publish the books ourselves, because Joseph said, don't change the words.
Exactly. Well, I was told when I wrote my spiritual book on the medicine wheel not to put a barcode on it and to just sell it to myself, just sell it by myself.
Yes.
Because they didn't want the system's 666 stamp on a pure book like that.
Yes.
Of course, it hurt me sales-wise, but I have integrity, so I listen. And the way you get your messages, I don't think I've ever shared this with you before. And I think it was 2006 when I was asked to speak at a 9/11 conference in Chicago. And, I had interviewed so many experts on it. I thought I knew everything I needed to know about it. But what was interesting is, Michael, for 2 months, every night at 2:00 in the morning, I would be awakened, and I would get 2 lines, just 2 lines for that speech. And I was so exhausted. I was like, can't you just do this in the morning and let me sleep? But I knew at the end of that lecture that it would be the absolute best lecture anyone would ever hear, because I truthfully didn't write it.
So you were given 2 different lines each night?
At 2 in the morning.
Oh, my goodness.
For months. It went on for months. And you know how I like my sleep, Michael. I was not a happy girl. But when when they were lining up the people to speak, I told them, I said, listen, you better have somebody very exciting on after me, because I'm guaranteeing you this lecture is going to bring down the house. And it did.
Excellent.
So, when you follow your intuition, you listen to that inner voice, when you're really channeling truth for spirit, it may be uncomfortable, because I know you're probably wiped out from finishing this book, but the end result is always worth it.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I am totally wiped out, but I must explain, as I think we've said before, it's not the fact that I've connected with Joseph that wipes me out, because that is bliss.
Right.
And that is an excitement in being able to bring this information through. What wipes me out is coming down from that high vibration back into this vibration, which claws at you and surrounds you like mud or tar.
I know, I feel like that every morning.
The dominant thoughts of the field and the dominant thoughts of mankind. And because you are, as you'll know, Meria, in that state, highly sensitive, you pick them up to a greater degree than you do in the everyday world.
Absolutely. It's like
that combating that lower energy is what exhausts me.
Absolutely. It's soul crushing. Listen,
yes,
I feel like that every morning before I turn on my gadgets to see what horror happened while I was sleeping. So,
thank goodness we have sleep. Thank goodness we can escape for a few hours.
That's for sure. Anyway, I have some questions for you from our listeners. And the one question is kind of interesting, and I love him. This is from Toby. He said, this might be a boring question. He said, but I wonder, what does Michael do to relax? I don't think it's a boring question. I think it's an excellent question.
No, it isn't a boring question. Well, as a young man, I was a frustrated special effects director. I was always fascinated with model work in series and in TV series and films, and the way that models could be made to look real. And there was a director here that I met a couple of times called Jerry Anderson, who in the 60s and 70s produced, first of all, puppet programs, very sophisticated puppet programs like Thunderbirds, which you've probably heard of over there.
Oh, yeah.
And then went on to live action. And I began as a model maker in my early teens. I made some very bad models, and then progressed and taught myself new skills and linked with other like-minded chaps who also made models. And that was the basis of the hobby magazine that I produced for some 20 years. And this is a spiritual story. It doesn't sound like it, but it is. That magazine that I published and edited in conjunction with David, one of the members of the Band of Light, allowed me and by the way, it was called Sci-Fi and Fantasy Modeling, and that's what it concentrated on. The sort of ships that you would see in science fiction films, spaceships, and how to make them and how to dirty them down and make them look realistic. But because we were doing it for ourselves, it allowed us the flexibility to also work spiritually. And so in the early days, I would be taking services at spiritualist churches, but then later on, David and I sat, before Jane and Tony joined the two of us, sat when we could to bring through the Joseph communications. So it became, it was a labor of love, model making, that became a job that sustained us at a modest level for 20 years, but also allowed us the flexibility to say, today we're sitting. Today we're going to tune into higher vibrations and see what they want us to do. So the answer is, I still make models. Not the sort of thing that you would buy in a hobby shop, but things that are 3, 4, 5 feet long. And a very tolerant Jane puts up with all these things and doesn't say anything about them.
Well, we all have to have our hobbies, that's for sure.
Yes.
And to relax, people have asked me that question for 20 years of blasting out the news, how does it not affect you? And I let people know right after the show, I get busy in my life. I go to the gym, I release all the anger, all the frustration, just moving my body. But, otherwise, I like to relax with good word games. Okay. So it's different for everybody, but, keeps your brain sharp. And that's what I enjoy doing. Because if we live in this reality 24/7, I don't think any of us could survive.
No, I don't think we'd remain sane. There has to be something that takes us away in creativity from the upset of this level of consciousness.
Right. If it's conscious at all. Sometimes I wonder about, is it conscious at all? Okay, I have some really interesting questions from Darren.
Darren, yes.
And, it's a little long, but actually it's several questions, and I think they're great questions.
Right.
He's asking about intelligence after death.
Right.
He says, when we ascend into our life after death, how does our intelligence and personality transcend? Is it the same? Are we automatically genius on the other side? I think this is a great question.
It is a great question. Yeah. Should we answer that bit first?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, intelligence is a means of dealing with our environment, isn't it? If we distill it down. Mm-hmm. It's a means of coping with and manipulating our environment on this level. And also the retention of facts and figures. That's how we measure intelligence. we have, independent of that, a spirit personality. But that spirit personality is not just the personality that we have in this particular lifetime. Because the personality we have in this particular lifetime is here to enable us to learn certain lessons. We've set it up in conjunction with those who help us on the other side, with our karmic considerations. We've set it up so that we will, if we get things right, learn certain things during this lifetime that will enable us to progress further through the spiritual spheres of reality once we've passed over. So the personality that we have and the intelligence that we have are not our spiritual, they are part of, but they are not the whole of our spiritual intelligence or our spiritual personality. Our spiritual personality is the sum of all the experiences we've had as the number of personalities we've had since we began to incarnate here.
Wow.
And also, our spiritual intelligence is not from the head, it's from the heart. And spiritual intelligence is understanding the way that God expresses himself or herself or itself, the way that we express ourselves as spirits, and understanding how we create as the angelic beings that we truly are. So what we've learned in a particular lifetime goes with us in that we can draw on it. But it's only a piece of the pie. It's only one chapter in the entire book of our spiritual existence. And what we set great store on earthly intellect here. But earthly intellect may or may not help us when we get back to the spiritual realms, because it's what we've learned as the spirits that we really are that's important.
Right, right. Well, here's another part. Here's another part to that question,
Right.
which is also very interesting. He said, if we take up, whether or not we take our personalities with us, he said, what if our personalities were tainted with something like autism or OCD or, a personality disorder that made us outcast in our societies? Would that
Right.
carry over with us?
Well, I've got various pairs of trousers. I have a pair of trousers that I wear when I go to the sanctuary, and they're a very smart pair of trousers. And I have other pairs of trousers, including a pair of trousers that I wear when I'm model making. And that pair of trousers that I wear when I'm model making have got, there are bits of glue stuck to them. There's bits of car filler stuck to them. There are holes in them. And my point is, I'm not either pair of trousers. I'm the spirit that's inhabiting that suit of clothes. And so the autism or any other aspect of this earthly personality is there often to teach us as a spirit something, or to teach the people around us whose lives we touch something. And it's not really us. It's in the lower stages of spiritual reality, once we pass over, if we're not terribly au fait with how things work on that side, it is possible that we will retain some of those characteristics until we creatively, from the heart, think our way out of them. In other words, realize that we don't need them and that they're not part of us.
Right.
That they've been part of something we've been wearing in order to operate in a certain environment.
Right.
But we progress from those disabilities and through those disabilities into the spirit people that we really are, and we are the sum of the spirit experiences that we've had as multiple personalities, both male and female, that go back to our first incarnation. So we were the sum of all these things.
Right.
But we are not physically or mentally bound, except in cases where we still bind ourselves because of our dominant beliefs. But once we've grown out of those dominant beliefs, once we realize that we are perfect, once we realize that we are whole, then those things fall away, like that old pair of trousers.
That's a good analogy. Well, he also wondered, I guess, that, if you were all of a sudden better on the other side, would that make you unrecognizable in the spirit realm to others?
Yes, this is quite a complex one. It depends on the people that know you when they pass over, or the people that have known you and have already passed over. It depends on where they are on the spiritual ladder with regard to how they view personality.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if I go over and my mum only thinks of me as her son, then she will see me, the spirit that I really am, as her son. If, however, she thinks of me as her son, and the spirit that I really am, with the experiences that have enabled me to gather light on my spiritual journey, she will see me both as her son and as that spirit. I've had many instances when working as a medium where, for example, a baby has come through, and a baby has stood in front of me, a toddler has stood in front of me, and said, "This is what I look like. Tell my mum this is what I look like, this is who I am, this is how I passed." So I've given that information, and the mother has accepted that their child is in front of them, and then that child has suddenly grown in front of me into this wonderful, brilliant, shining, luminous spirit, and said, "Tell them that's who I am now. That's who I really am." So that the child is there in vision and the advanced spirit is there in vision, and they are one and the same thing. When friends pass over, sometimes we will go and collect them. We'll say, well, we get the message that somebody's passing on a certain day, and we're in the spirit realms, and we say, right, I'll go and collect them. I'll be that friend that is waiting for them when they pass over. And that friend will initially see us as who we were in our earthly personality. But then, if they are spiritually minded enough and spiritually open enough, they will also see us as the spirit that we are in reality. And that aspect of ourselves that we've shown to them, that they recognize, is simply that, an aspect, a facet of a far more rounded and far more light-filled being.
Well, I think the best way to understand that and see it visually, what you just said, is by rewatching, or if people have never seen it, the movie What Dreams May Come.
Oh, yes, indeed.
I mean, that movie just blew me away. The first night I saw it in the movie theater, I was like, wow, who wrote this? And then I went back 3 nights in a row to see it again because it just blew me away. But if you remember in that movie, there were a lot of people, especially his daughter, who felt her father didn't love her enough, who manifest a body as an Asian woman, a beautiful Asian woman, to get her father to notice her. But all along, of course, it's still her.
Yes.
And the way you see souls switch around in bodies in that, I just thought it was an excellent movie.
Yes, it was. I suppose there's also an analogy. Do you remember the TV series Quantum Leap?
Yes.
Where each week Sam Beckett would leap into another body and have to put something right.
Right.
And he would look in the mirror and see the person, but to himself, he was himself.
Right.
And it's very much like that.
Exactly.
That the core of us is who we always are. But the personality is a temporary facade, but can be drawn upon because we've gone through that experience.
Well, I would say our personalities here are your little dirty pants that you work on with your models. Now, it's interesting because I remember, when I was studying with Sun Bear, somebody had asked him a similar question, about channeling, actually. And, calling in spirits. And Sun Bear's attitude was you had to be very discerning. And you had to be ready to work with spirits if they showed up. Don't get afraid. But I also remember one line he said, which cracked me up. He said, listen, if your Uncle Joe was an idiot when he was on this planet and your Uncle Joe is talking to you from the other side, he's probably still an idiot. So you have to be discerning to who you listen to. I think that a lot of people are under the misconceptions that as soon as you die, you become perfect. You become all knowing, all wise, all of this. But that's really not the case. For some people, it could take thousands of our years for them to get there.
Yes, it depends what their attitude has been to spirituality, how they've treated themselves, how they've treated others, and whether they've actually, in a metaphorical sense, looked up from this earth and thought, I wonder if there's anything else, and investigated what else there might be. And yes, people do get locked into their present personality for a time. And there are spiritual realms that are not much different than this one. And those realms exist because the people in them have not prepared themselves for any further refinement of personal and group vibration. And so, yes, there are areas where there are streets, and there are areas where there are houses and shops, and all the things that we would expect here. But as soon as the spirit wants to move on, as soon as the spirit says, this is not for me, this is not refined enough, this is not the light that I'm looking for, then those things disappear and they find themselves on a higher plane of existence.
Well, that all makes sense to me, but I'm sure it'll make sense to a lot of people. You know, last time you were on the show, we talked about how everything has a consciousness and how we should bless everything. Do you remember that?
Yes, indeed.
Well, a lot of my listeners have done exactly that. And they said they've noticed a huge change in their living space by doing that.
Oh, that's great.
I was kind of surprised when I was reading through Many Voices, One Missions. I think it was Silver Star, where you started talking to Silver Star about, or he started talking to you, about drugs and alcohol.
Yes.
And what I found interesting, because I totally agree, is that he said that he calls alcohol basically the demon drink.
Yeah.
And that the drink can show you demons. And I try to explain to people that alcohol is a depressant. It's not going to cheer you up to start drinking if you're already depressed. But alcohol is a big issue right now in the United States because we have what they're saying is a dry drunk running for the Supreme Court. And he did show some pretty demonic faces through his testimony. So to me, it was like, well, either he's still drinking or he never got help with his alcoholic behavior, because that comes through even when you're dry.
The worry is what attaches itself to us in times when we lower our vibrations in that way. We become attractive to vibrations of a similar frequency. And we also become attractive to people on the spiritual side of life who have not yet given up that desire to be in an alcoholic state. Now, those people can't have a drink as we can have a drink, but what they can do is persuade someone who is easily persuaded to take alcohol, to take that alcohol. And when they take it, they will step into their aura or step close to their aura. The two auras mingle, and the person on the spiritual side actually gets the thrill of the taste and sensation of alcohol once again. So it's difficult here. There are so many. I understand why people turn to such things, because they feel their lives are terrible. Their lives are hard to cope with, and they just need to shut off. They just need to shut off from this world for a while and take the edge off their mind. But there are safer methods of doing that. And people are going to say, oh, he's going to talk about meditation again. But yes, I am, because that is a safe way of connecting with a higher vibration that fills you with light and takes you out of this earth and gives you exactly the same sensation that you would have with alcohol, but with none of the side effects and none of the hangers-on.
Right. Well, when I'm out and about, and I do counsel a lot of young people, and I do get to see a lot of young people, and a lot of them, when I look at them, I can see a heavy gray or black aura around them.
Yes.
And either it's alcohol or it's some serious drugs that they're doing. And they don't realize that leaves them wide open for a walk-in experience.
Yes, indeed.
And a lot of what walks in these days, obviously, is not very pleasant, nor from the angelic realm.
No, I've seen that black around people myself on occasion, and it's a terrible thing.
Yes, it is, or, maybe they'll have an aura that's a half inch around their body, which is like close to death.
Yes.
So, I try to tell, younger people that if they are going to do anything like that they always have to put a protection around themselves first, because they're going to be vacating their body. And, nature abhors a vacuum.
Yes. And of course, this state can be reached, that negative state can be reached, if we are not spiritually disciplined too. It's okay for us to try to contact the spiritual worlds, but we have to know what we're doing. And as you said earlier, Maria, we have to know who we're truly contacting. And we have to, our motive determines what we get back. If we are, the number of young people that I used to see in the spiritualist churches who would come up shivering and pale after a service and say, I've been playing with a Ouija board and I don't know what to do. And they've left themselves open. They haven't gone through the right channels. And the right channel is to go to Source first, is to go to God first, whatever our concept of divinity is, and ask for protection. And we shouldn't approach the spiritual realms unless we wish to work on ourselves positively and work for the world positively. Those are the only two reasons we should contact the spiritual realms.
Well, what do you think about...
It's the same lure for young people as alcohol or drugs. Oh, there's a thrill waiting for us. Let's see what happens.
Right.
The problem is what happens can be very nasty, as we both know.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Michael, we're going to take a short break. Stay with us, okay. Michael, and I'll be right back. Hi, this is Meria Heller. If you're enjoying this show, please consider listening to the rest of it, along with hundreds of other hours of education, by a small subscription on my site. Get over to meria.net, meria.net. You are the only thing that supports this show. There's no corporate control, and there's plenty of education on site. So please consider either a subscription or a donation to keep the work going. There are too many alternative voices out there that are being silenced because of lack of support. So if you don't want MSM to be the only mind-controlling news out there, please consider supporting the people that support you. And help us all save something for the future for our children. Thank you so much.